All right, everybody. Well, we're going to get things rolling. We got a few of us here in the Market Center, and then we have probably more of us are going to see this on video, whether you're watching it live right now or you'll be seeing it later on our captivating YouTube channel. All right, so the main thing we're going to go over today, obviously, is a continuation of DocuSign. We're going to go over some things from the buyer side of things. Kim is going to walk us through that. She is an expert at it, and I am not. So you're happy that she's doing it, not me. All right, guys, here's Kim.
All right. So, and if you're in chat, feel free to answer this in chat, but how on like a level of 1 to 10, the people that are here right now, how comfortable are you in DocuSign? 1 being never touched it before, this is my first time doing it. 5 being I've done a couple of little things, but it's not my favorite system. I don't fully know what I'm doing. I'm a little insecure. 10 being I feel great. I'm just getting tips and tricks. 1. 5, okay.
6.
Okay.
10.
10. All right.
I'm gonna go solid 5.
And Kristen's a 5. Okay, awesome. So we'll I wanted to make sure I wasn't going too far back for anybody that may have watched the first one. But I also want to make sure we give everybody good value today. So I have got my beautiful contact, which is always your place you're going to start whenever you're doing anything in DocuSign. You want to start from your contacts in your command. So our contact for the day is Sample McSampleson, very dear friend of mine. You know, we're going to go ahead and make sure we have an email for that contact, and we're going to create an opportunity real quick. So whether you've been in .loop or DocuSign, you should be pretty familiar with your opportunities. I am under my personal account. Yeah. What you got?
We're going to go to the screen share.
All right, so back to our opportunity here. I am under my personal account. How many of you guys are on teams versus individual? Team, individual? Okay, so we got kind of a mix here. If you're in a team, you're going to want to make sure that you're selecting that if it's part of a team opportunity, depending on how your structure is. We are going to deal with buyers today because I feel like a lot of times if you're comfortable with that, those are usually the people that have to move really fast in this market. You've got an hour to put a contract together versus listing. You can kind of take your time. So we're going to work with a sample buyer today. Sample McSampleson, opportunity name. I'm just going to give him a 1234 Main Street in my opportunity so I can find it again later. We're going to go ahead and say Jeffersonville. All right, you can fill out as much of this as you're comfortable with. We're going to go ahead and just give some sample numbers so we see how those move around in our DocuSign. All right. So once you have your opportunity created, you're going to click on that opportunity. So the one thing that you're going to want to do is make sure you're filling in details everywhere you can. It can feel a little bit redundant at first, but you'll see that some things carry over and save you time in the long run. And that way, if you're having to troubleshoot or things like that, you can kind of see where the problems are coming from. So whenever I create an opportunity, and the same thing will be true in DocuSign, it's details before documents. So in your command setting here, we've got a couple of tabs up here. We've got details, and documents are going to be your main first 2 until you have an accepted offer. So under the details, I always make sure to fill out this property section here. So 1234 Main Street. Again, that probably won't come up. We're going to go ahead and fill it in manually here since we don't have a 1234 Main Street. Clark County 47130. All right, so you're going to want to put that property information in there. Anything here that you can go ahead and put in if you know what the buyer's time frame, financing, things like that. From there, we're going to go to documents. So details to documents is always your flow. Contacts, details, documents. And I have a nifty little graphic that I can share with you guys, and I'll put on the Facebook page at the very end that will have some very visual little reminders for a couple of the phrases that we use. I used to teach children's ministry for a long time. So if I can give it to you in a bite-sized chunk that'll be stuck in your head as a phrase, I will try and do that for you because I know that helps me. All right, so we are in our Documents tab of our opportunity. Next thing you're going to want to do under this, let's see, checklist type. So right here, we're going to decide whether we are dealing with Indiana or Kentucky for our form. So that'll tell Bob and us and our team members, whoever can see this opportunity, which state we're working with so that they can make sure they have the right compliance checks. So in this case, it's an Indiana form, and that will pre-populate what forms you need for compliance. If you're familiar with .loop, you're probably familiar and followed up to that point. So here is where DocuSign is different. We're going to start a transaction and head to DocuSign.
You do have to have this pre-set up and connected to DocuSign.
Yeah, and
If you don't, let us know.
there's a great packet for that in our resource folder that kind of talks about how to connect you to DocuSign for the first time. If you're having issues with connecting to DocuSign and seeing the forms that you need to see, let us know. We can take some time after the training and kind of help you track down what it is. If you're not seeing forms in particular, chances are it's your NRDS number. So when in doubt, turn to the NRDS is kind of the phrase to hold on to there. I will make this nice and big for you guys. My screen wants to shrink everything down. So you're going to have to sign into your DocuSign. Again, if your email and things are not working here, it's a sign that you haven't connected it correctly to your command. So that would be a great thing to check in with Keevan or Jay or Sean about, and they can make sure that you're able to connect to DocuSign. All right. So once you are in DocuSign and you have signed in, what was the key phrase for details? Details to documents. So we're always going to want to start with our details tab. Yeah, and it does organize it. Jay pointed out a good thing here. It does organize it left to right. So that's kind of your other visual cue to start on that left-hand tab with the details. As much as you can fill out here is going to help you further down the road. The only thing I would caution you against, and we said this at the last training as well, don't fill in for a side you don't represent, with the exception of the other agent. So if you are representing buyers, even if the MLS lists the owner name, you're not going to want to put it in as your seller, because if they sign differently than they had it listed on the MLS, it's going to pre-populate all of their name fields under the signature with whatever you put in here. So it's kind of a pain for the other agent if they then have to erase it or do little things like that. You really don't want them editing a contract that's already been formatted. Whiting anything out on a contract is a big no-no. So it's better to just not fill in if you don't know the other side or if you don't represent the other side. All right. So on this tab, the more that you can fill out, the better. Local currency, if you have an MLS ID, I'm just going to pop something in there for now, where the lead came from. This is really helpful for teams to have this filled out. So even though like you guys are really the only one that's going to see the origin of the lead or what the status is, it can be really helpful if you have a TC or an admin that is viewing these things for them to see where you're at in the process at a glance. So this is kind of a great little summary page for your team. So we're going to say offer made in this case. Told you earlier, McSampleson's a good friend of mine, so he's a personal referral. So again, this is the second place you're having to fill in that address. From here, though, it's going to populate to your forms. So you don't want to miss that step of filling that in. So we're going to do it one more time here. 1234 Main Street. We were in Jeffersonville, Clark County. So this page is really what's going to save you some work on the form side. You don't want to have to fill this in on every single form, and so some of these fields will automatically do it for you. We're just going to leave that as a 1900. So your offer date, earnest money amount, some of these things will carry over for you. Entity holding the earnest money, say the listing broker. Some of this stuff you can fill in as you go. So if you do get an accepted offer, your appraisal's received, it's a nice place to be able to track it all in one place with your documents where you're at on everything. All right, so I'm just going to fill in a couple more things here just to kind of give us an idea of where things come up in our forms. All right, the other thing you want to make sure you do, so we don't represent the sellers in this sample, so we're going to skip right over the seller line, seller 1, seller 2, down that far right-hand side. Listing agent, we might know, and that's helpful for us to have. Some people prefer to send their forms directly through DocuSign to the other agent. It's a great way to get proof that they saw it. I know some of my team members do that. I personally don't. I like to download a packet and send it via email and ask for a confirmation receipt. It's just different ways of doing things. It's whatever you prefer. The nice thing about doing it via DocuSign is you get that receipt. You get to see when it's opened or viewed, things like that. But it is going to populate another copy of that document that says signed or viewed after they're done viewing it. So that can get a little bit confusing. Yeah. Yes. Right. Right. So you'll see on this, in this case, the listing agent can get filled in here, and that shouldn't populate on the warranty form, which is where it was the concern for it.
Yeah, it populates on your purchase agreement at the top.
Yeah.
It's supposed to, but the thing that it populated on was that the American Preferred Home warranty form has it as a buyer's agent instead of, if you were a listing agent and you're paying for it. That's why.
Right.
Don't put it into your America's Preferred Home warranty section down there. It will repopulate back and fill it.
And I'll show you kind of work around. That's one of the trickiest documents right now that we're kind of working on getting fixed. But I'll kind of show you my workaround, because when you are putting something together, you don't always have time to reach out, you know, if it's late at night, things like that. So I'll show you kind of my tips and tricks for having backup methods when things aren't working or are doing kind of strange things that you can't figure out. I'll kind of show you some of the tricks on that. Right.
Yeah. Majority of your docs will use this.
Right. So, and again, if you're going to send it to the agent through DocuSign, it's best to have at least their email and their name in there. If you want to put in more than that, you can. Yeah. Buyer one, we've got our sample McSampleson. He's got an email in there. You can fill in all the details on here. It's helpful if you do, but the main things you're going to want are that email, because you can't send it to them for signatures without an email. And you want to make sure that their name written here is as they're going to sign their documents, because that's what's going to populate under their signature. So if they want a middle initial, sample J McSampleson, things like that, you're going to want to change that here, because this is what it's pulling from. No buyer two on this one. And then have your own details in as buyer agent. All right, so that's our details tab. We'll hit save. And again, we went over this pretty well in the last DocuSign training. So if you really want to go in depth for what each of those fields are, you can watch back to that first one. We're going to scroll all the way back up. And details to documents is always our flow. All right, so when you have a new room, so in .loop it was loops, in DocuSign it's your room. So think about it as when you're going to meet with a buyer or a seller, first you're doing your agent stuff on the back end from your office, from your room. Okay, so anything that you would fill out as an agent, you're gonna do in your room. Anything that your seller would fill out, your seller's disclosures, signatures, the date they signed, that's gonna happen in an envelope. They're not there in the room with you. So think of it that way. And that can be a little bit helpful. So under your documents, first thing we're going to do is we're going to add some documents. Most of your documents will come from the DocuSign forms. And most of those will come from the DocuSign forms group. If you get to this point and you don't see this, or you don't see anything under the actual group, you may not have it connected to your NRDS number. So that would be, again, something to check back with Sean, Keevan, get that connected so that you can actually get to the forms, which is very helpful. In this case, we're going to start with an Indiana residential buyer packet. It will have some of them already selected for you, but you know what the circumstances are for the sale. So you're going to want to pick what's going to make the most sense for you. Some agents like to have all the forms that they're going to need for the transaction right at the beginning. So they might do their inspection response and things like that included right then, just so it's already in the room and they can kind of track what they still need to do as the transaction goes on. I like to just do what I need to do for the offer, especially on a buyer, since it's so fast in this market. So in this case, it's going to be the purchase agreement. It might be an exclusive agency contract if you haven't gotten that already. Let's see, what are our other main ones? Closing costs, I like to give them up front. We are going to do our COVID. We are going to do our affiliated, anything that you're going to need for compliance with an accepted offer, I like to get up front. It leaves you not having to track things down afterwards. We're going to put in the APHW warranty agreement since that's a tricky little form. And we'll take a look at that. Client contact, and most of that one pre-populates, so that's a nice, easy form. We are going to deal with our professional recommendations, office policies, alternative dispute, closing off, and for your protection. That's kind of my set. If you have something else that you need, it's a certain circumstance, and you're like, where is this form? When in doubt, ask yourself, where IA are you? Kind of a goofy way to remember it, but most everything will be under, and I'll show you again, add DocuSign forms. If something is missing, go to the library and ask, where IA are you? Because chances are it's in the IAR group. And the nice thing about this is you can search right in that box. So if you know you need the mutual release, start typing it, it'll bring up all your options. If you know you need an addendum, chances are it's in the IAR folder. So ask yourself, where IA are you? All right. So I'm going to cancel out from that. I like to add all my forms at once. So if I have, with a buyer, you're going to want that MLS client detail. You're going to click add from my computer. It's really tiny on our screen here. I'm sorry. Let's see if I've got an MLS detail here. Just grab a general one. I've got a client package. That'll work. So you can add in your seller's disclosure, any documents that you need. Seller's disclosure, it's usually the MLS client detail, a pre-approval letter. You may want to keep a little list just because you're doing two separate tasks. You're doing one from a group and one that might be from your computer. So I like to keep a little list of things I need to add in personally, but you can add those all in here. You'll see that all of these start as forms, which tells you that they're fillable, but anything that you add in is going to come in as a PDF. If it's a PDF, you cannot fill it until it's time to put it in an envelope. So just something to keep in mind. And then I like to set up folders right up front too. So your room docs is where everything sits. Just like in your office, everything comes in, you usually throw it on your desk, right? If you're anything like me, you might have a little pile or an inbox tray or something like that. So that's a great place to have. It's kind of a catch-all, but usually you want to have some kind of organization that's going to make it really easy for you to find it. Last week, we showed one way of doing it. Jay showed how he's got a folder for certificates. He's got a folder for each offer. For me, I like to keep it really simple. I usually have 3 folders. So the first one's going to be my room docs, which is automatic. You can't really change that. We're going to go to actions, add a folder. Depending on whether I represent the buyer or the seller, and what's nice about Chrome is it'll remember what you've typed into these boxes before. So if you do the same things over and over again, you don't have to retype them every time. So in this case, I'm going to say buyer signed offer. That's a clue that only the buyer has signed it, not the seller. So I'm going to create a folder for that. Once they have signed it, I'm going to move everything into there. And then I'm also going to add a folder at the beginning here for executed docs or executory docs that are signed by everybody. So once I have an accepted offer, I'm going to archive all of my buyer docs because it's only signed by one side. I don't want to have to go through 3 different versions of it. So I am a big fan of the archive feature, and I'll show you how to do that in just a bit. So I've got my 3 different folders. They'll tell me what stage all of my documents are at. And I find that to be really helpful when you're doing compliance. Anything in the room docs is a cue to me that I still have to deal with it. So either I'm waiting on a signed copy to come back, I need to fill it out. So I just kind of use it for that. Let's pull open, one more thing. The other thing I like to do, and this is just me being OCD, but it helps me a lot. I rename all of my documents right up front to be as simple as possible. I don't need to know that it's IAR 02. I just need to know that this is my purchase agreement. I don't need to know that it's the exclusive agency contract that's IAR 15. So I take all of those numbers out because it really helps me in compliance to find it quickly because I know what word I'm looking for when I go to match it back to my command. So that is something that will literally take you about 2 minutes to do up front, but it can save you a lot of hassle in the long term. So I'll do that on just a couple here. All right. Let's go ahead and go into our purchase agreement. So if it's got the blue sign by it, it's a form. Those are never going to be signed copies yet. So we will open up this first one here. All right, you can kind of see anything like this that's going to bleed over. For the time being, the quickest workaround is just to do a couple of spaces in there. And when it actually goes to save the final document, it'll have both next to each other. I think it's like 5 spaces, something like that, to get that in there. You're going to want to fill in anything that you can on this screen here. Don't know if I remember your ID number, so we'll just, close enough. All right, so you're going to want to fill in all your details here. I'm not going to go ahead and take the time to do all of that right now. A couple of things to call out on a purchase agreement. It will never fill in the township for you, so watch for that one. I'm going to say Jeffersonville Township. The legal description is also something you're going to have to copy and paste from your MLS. I like to have a couple of different tabs, and here's one thing. I'll go ahead and pause for just a second. If you work with a team or you are a TC who works with multiple people, there is an amazing little trick for Google Chrome where you can actually have a people tab and you can switch between, well, I will in a little bit. You can switch between different people with different settings. So I kind of serve as a TC for my whole team. I have one for each agent. Each one has a set of bookmarks that is specifically to them. So each one has their specific information saved. So if I need to go into DocuSign as Jay, I can do that. If I need to go into DocuSign as Cody, I can do that. And I'm not having to remember passwords, switch back and forth between windows. I can just open a complete new window with all of their information and work as them. So that's a really nice feature of Google Chrome that's really helpful as you're going through. Okay, so back to the form. So generally, if I was, say, helping Cody write an offer, I'd have Cody's tab open. I'd have his MLS matrix so that I could download his version of the MLS client sheet and have everything working together for him. So if you're a TC or you work with multiple agents on your team and you might need to log in as either one of them, that's a really helpful way to do it. You're going to make sure you get your legal description. You're going to make sure you get any of the appliances. So we're just going to say fridge, at no additional value to the buyer, heating sale. So you'll have some radio buttons and things that you can only pick one out of the 3. Again, I think we mentioned last time, you've got to type in some of these. So 100,000, that's not going to auto populate because we didn't have a field that had it as text. We had a field that had it as numbers, and so that's what came over. Your earnest money, business days. So all of this, you can kind of see what your options are as you go through. If you're not sure if it's required or optional, you can mouse over it. It'll pop up some information for you. I won't take the time to fill out every little detail of this contract. Just take notice of what things you can and can't fill in. Every now and then, one thing to be aware of on contracts is that if you start getting text that is too long, so I'm just going to type a whole bunch of things into here, it will start overriding the later part of the contract, which we don't want, right? We don't want to cover it up. So if you find that happening, what you can do, since you can't change the text in a form, the form is the template, that's not up to you to change. But if you leave it blank, you can go in and add your own text at the later on step. Same as handwriting it in before you take it to signatures for the sign. Yeah. So we'll go over that in a little bit, but just something to know. If you are having trouble with a field on the form, you can always add in a text box later to deal with it. Let's see.
If it overwrites and you need more space, just don't fill that in. Because when you get to sending the envelope to somebody, you get that editing stage that you can go in and put your own text and resize the text. So you can always add to this later. So the way I like to think about it for that is when you're filling in from here, it's kind of like filling in on a typewriter. You can't change the font on a typewriter, right? So, but when you print out a form, you can go and you can handwrite, you can make your handwriting
as small as you want. So this is the time that's like kind of like the typewriter. When you go for signatures, same as a pen, you can customize. So if that's kind of helpful, that's one of the ways you can think about it.
But remember to fill it out.
Yeah.
That's your catch-all.
Right.
Is later to make sure you go through every line and make sure you fill it out.
All right, so I'm going to skip through a bunch of these because you guys know how to fill out contracts. But let's just make sure that we know what the main issues could be here. Okay, you'll see here at the bottom, I did not fill in a seller name, and therefore there's no seller name here, right? If I changed this, if I started to put a name in here, Mickey Mouse, I'm going to go ahead and save and close this, which is what you're going to do when you're done with any document, or you just want to take a break. This is not going to send it to anybody or anything else, but it will go ahead and hold it for you. Let's jump back to that details tab, and you'll see that now it's got Mickey Mouse in the seller name, and now on every document that has a seller one, it has put it in there. The nice thing is documents and details are a two-way street. So if you change one on one, it'll change it on the other. So I'm in my detail sheet. I see, uh-oh, there's a Mickey Mouse here. I can delete it and save it. It's gone from all my forms. That does not count. That does not count if you already have signed forms. But as far as the templates go, details and documents are that two-way street. Until it's signed, you can change it. Yeah. All right. So let's take a look at the APHW, because I know that's one that's kind of tricky and it gives people a lot of problems. So the main problems that I've seen have come up from this real estate agent email. The form doesn't know which agent is which, because either agent can actually order your warranty, right? But right now, the way that the form is set up, I believe it assumes that it's the buyer's agent. So if you do put things in, let me see where the actual field is. I think it's the one here. Yeah, and you can mouse over it to double check.
See how it filled in the buyers? What if it was the seller agent?
Right. So if you're the listing agent, you're filling this out and you fill in your agent information on this sheet, it's going to put you in like you're the buyer. So watch out for this form in particular.
If you erase it here too, after it's been filled in, it erases
it from everywhere. Yes.
Okay. So we're going to fix this.
In the meantime, one thing that I have done is I downloaded from .loop a copy of it, and I just have it as a blank PDF. That's a 2-page PDF that doesn't have the whole packet, because if they're waiving it, it's a pain in the butt to get 13 pages of information about something you're waiving. So I have a blank PDF and I bring it in just like I do with my seller's disclosures or my MLS client detail sheet. I just add a document and I customize it on the DocuSign page. If you need a copy of that, email me and let me know after class, and I'd be happy to send a copy your way. Keep an eye out. I'll tell you, any form that you do that with, that you save as a PDF, keep an eye out, because you're going to have to be the one to make sure you're still compliant if that form changes. So you're going to have to really watch any updates from Bob or Craig about new forms.
Yeah. We have to turn this in.
This is still a conditionally required document.
The Market Center, I guess, gets their E&O insurance actually helps every time that we fill this out and stuff too. So is it required? Do we fill it out, either waive it or fill it out and leave it?
Yeah.
So you must.
Which you don't have to fill it out completely. If you get them to sign the waiver line and you have the property address, you know, you don't have to go through all the details of what make of fridge they have and all of that. But the other thing to know about this template is it has a random box right here too that will be required. So you'll see on this page, it actually has a little fill in.
I put in
NA, he puts in address. You just have to put something there. You could put a period, you know, whatever you want there.
But somebody, when they were creating this, they selected text box and they went over to drag it somewhere and
they forgot about it.
And it just landed there. So if you don't fill it out, you can't go any further. So yeah.
Some of these forms you will not be able to do anything on. Let me see if I can remember one of the ones. Is it professional recommendations? Let me check. Or affiliated business. So sometimes you'll click on a form. Nope, this one has some fields in there. Let me do the affiliated business, I think is the one I'm thinking of. Yes. So on this one, literally the only thing is just that it's printing the address across the bottom. So there's nothing that you can do on this form because it's the only thing it needs is signature. So that'll be, again, something with a pen. That'll be the DocuSign envelope. So once you've got all of these ready to go, you've gone into each one, you filled out what you need to fill out, you hit save and close. So that's your main process of an offer, all happens right there. Once you are ready, I'm gonna go ahead and delete this document. So you have a couple of options if you have documents in there that you don't need. I was pulling this in as an example of like an MLS client detail sheet.
In the left-hand corner to get that mark.
So anytime you select a document, you get extra options, whether you select one or you select multiple. So in this case, say I pulled this in on accident, it's the wrong file. I'm going to click the bubble. In this case, I'm going to hit delete. If it was like purely the wrong transaction. If it's something you ever, for any reason, might want to come back to, you're going to hit archive instead. And it's super easy to get to. They stick around, and I'll show you what that looks like in a little bit here. That's true. Yeah, you can also right click on any of these and do some extra special things beyond what's up at the top. These are kind of your most common ones that you're going to touch. I think earlier we right clicked to do the rename. So that can be really helpful. When you are ready, you have done everything that you need to do in your room as an agent. Sorry, didn't need to open that up. And you are ready to get the information from the buyer, whether that's signatures, whether they want a home inspection, things like that, that they can fill out. Every now and then I do that on a small screen. You are going to select all of the things that you want to go to that buyer.
Or you can go to select all of the documents.
Well, it depends. If you have other documents up in here, you may not want to do that. So when I'm doing an offer, I usually go through one by one and make sure I'm sending only the things I want to. And we're going to go up to that pen right in the middle of your screen, create envelope. These are going to be the things that your buyer is going to sign. Or if you've already had your buyer signatures and you want broker Bob to give his signatures, that's also where you'll go for that. I like to do 2 separate envelopes, one to my buyers, and then once I get it back from them, then send it to Bob so that you're not waiting. Because when there's anybody left that has not signed yet on your envelope, you will not get back the signed copies. So you don't get it back a version every time one person signs. You get it when the whole shebang is done. So be careful about that. If you've got buyers that have different schedules or things like that, and you might need one of the papers, send separate envelopes. That's perfectly fine, but send them one at a time or put them in a certain order. So this is going to my buyers. This is going to go to sample, mix, sample, send. I'm clicking that pen and it is creating an envelope. Again, naming your envelopes is going to be a huge help to you later down the road, just like naming your documents in a way that's going to help you. It's going to take me a second here to make it, apparently. Yeah. And while that's loading, at the very end, I've got a graphic of 4 things that'll be helpful, tips and tricks to remember. And I also have a daily dose of DocuSign little thing. It's a 5-day guide to like, okay, day 1, just do this part of it. Day 2, okay, now we're going to do this part of it. And it'll kind of walk you through all the steps. If you only have 15 minutes a day to give DocuSign, it'll get you there in about 5 days. So I'll share that with you guys at the end too. So up here, again, we're envelope details. I always put initial offer if I'm working with a buyer. You can move these around. So for me, I really always like the buyer to see the purchase agreement first. I might want them to see their estimated closing costs next. Things that are less important to them, if we know that they're waiving the home warranty, I'll drag that to the end. Just because they're going to see them in a certain order and it's all going to come in one big long screen that they're going to go down. So the things that are most important to them that you need their most attention on, you definitely want up at the front. If you forgot anything, you can click here on Room Docs and choose anything else that's already in your Room Docs. Let's see what else is there. It looks like you can also upload if you had something from your computer, you forgot your MLS client detail, anything like that, the pre-approval letter came in after you finished the forms, you can add it right there. Add recipient. So this is choosing who that envelope is going to go to. In the last class, Jay showed the pre-tagged roles, and that's how he prefers to start. I prefer to go by room participants. The difference is the pre-tagged roles has some pre-assigned signature fields. I like to control a lot of things manually. I like to control the size of the signatures. I like to control who's signing where. I really just like to kind of have that instead of it being so templated.
Remember last week where some of the signature lines were in the wrong place?
Right.
Dates were in the wrong place. Stuff like
If
that.
I'm already having to touch it and the template's not quite there yet, in the meantime, sometimes it's easier just to drag them yourself. So
We're showing you different ways. To do
yeah,
that.
so this will be, let me find my mouse again. Where did it go? There it goes. I always include myself when I'm sending it to buyers as an offer, and then the buyer. So you can select both of those people there. You'll see that it puts both of these as one, and that's the order that they're going in. So if they're both one, it's going at the same time. I always like to have it go to myself first and my buyer second. You can even choose to add yourself in again and have it change from a need to sign for the last time to needs to view. So if you want to see it when it's done and you want it to notify you a certain way, you can do that. If somebody just needs to see it, so say you're sending this completed offer once it's done, not in this envelope, but if you want the other agent, you want to send it to the other agent via DocuSign, you can send it this way and say needs to view. That way it doesn't ask them to sign it, which they're not going to need to do, but that way they can see it, or receives a copy. You can do that too. So there's some options there. If you put somebody in here that doesn't need to be there and you kind of mouse over this area over here, you can take them back out again. So say you had somebody that you don't need, say you put Broker Bob in this first round and you really don't want him, now's the time to do that. So you can put back in, we're gonna put our buyer back in. I always like to customize this. So it's gonna send it to them as please DocuSign. That way they know what they're doing. I'm gonna say offer on 1234 Main Street. And this is just how the email will come to your clients. We'll just say attached. I don't like to send blank emails. If you are waiting on something like a pre-approval letter, you can just hit save and close. If you'd prefer to do that and come back to it later, let me show you what that looks like. So you'll see it's a grayed out draft. So it hasn't sent anything to anybody yet. You haven't done any signature fields. And you can always come back to this. Let me see if I can drag this out from full screen because I can't see behind the camera there. All right, there we go. You can save and close. Oops. Zoom. Is it still connected? Saying it's signed out. Make sure. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. Looks like it's still recording. So yeah, it might be good. All right. And so you can see we have a couple of spots that are still blank. So I didn't fill these out in the forms. I need to come back to them here. So this is kind of your second chance to make sure you've got everything you need in your contract.
Sometimes when you see also there's co-agents and you have to do an agent/agent.
Yeah.
Here's where you can do that as blank. If you filled it in earlier, it's going to run off the page.
Yeah.
Those are things to think about when filling that out.
So this would be that sample of, yeah, you need to do something smaller in handwriting. This is the handwriting section. So up at the top here, the one thing to keep an eye on is who you are doing this as. Yeah, I kind of can. It's kind of a little bit tricky. So this drop down arrow, you'll see all of these are matching yellow. So if I pull a signature box over right now, that signature box is associated to me. So it's going to ask me to sign it. If I change it to my buyer, it's going to, I pull over a box, it's going to be the buyer's signature. So as me, since I don't want my buyer putting this information in, I'm going to grab some text here since I forgot to put this in earlier. So you'll see it turns yellow. It's a required field. So here you can set it if you want to just set it to that's the buyer. Nope, have me fill it out. You can change your recipient there. You can change whether it's required. So if you have some information you're missing from your buyer that you need from them before you can submit the offer, you can have them fill it in here. I find it easier usually to text and get that information, fill it in myself and send it as complete as possible. But that's always an option for you. If you need, their mailing address or something like that on a form, You can set it as a required field. You can set it as just an empty field. Whether it's required or not, you can actually fill it out now. Hold on. Yeah. You can actually go ahead and fill it out now. You don't have to fill it after it's sent anywhere. So we see that kind of runs over again. So if something is running over, it's too big, you can click that formatting spot and change it down. It'll make it smaller. You can click and drag the corners to make things fit if you're really OCD like I am. You can do a lot of things there. The other thing you can do, you can drag checkboxes and you can move those around. So if you want to put a checkbox over one of these, you can select the checkbox value so you can make it already pre-clicked so you don't have to do it later on, or you can unclick it. You can hit, there's a tiny little plus here, it's probably a little bit hard to see. If you're doing that, what it does is it links these two boxes. It knows that these two boxes are part of the same general task. So if I had not filled in the X here, I might want to do a third plus, and that gives me all three options there. If you do something you don't need, you can delete it. You can just hit your backspace or delete key, select it, delete it, or you can delete it down here. So there's a couple of options there. Let's see what else we might need to do. You can also do radio buttons. So let's see, we have some examples from the form. Where are the radios here? Oh, I think it's up at the contingency, sorry. So if you want them to only, or you to only be able to select one option out of several, so either it's not contingent or it is contingent, you can use the radio buttons to do that. And again, you can do it up front by selecting the radio button values over here. You say, yep, go ahead and do that one. Nope, take it off. So if you did not do it in the form, or if you brought something in from a PDF like the APHW home warranty agreement that I bring in as a PDF, I have to do all of these fields manually on that document. So it is kind of a backup, and backups always take longer. Whenever you have to go to a second version of doing something because the primary one isn't working, it's going to take a little bit longer, but you do have tools and options there for you. So you'll notice that all of the ones I've done so far are under yellow. So anything in the contract really should be assigned to me, with the exception of the signatures here. All right. So you want to make sure if you're doing the buyer's signature that you're set to the buyer. That's one thing to always check over before you send it. Make sure that all of your boxes are colored the right way that you want them. I have gotten on a roll before and put my own signature there on accident. It's really easy to do, and it's really easy to fix too. So if you did have, say I was working as me and I forgot to change back and I put my own signature there, you can either select it and hit backspace. You can select it and come over to recipient and reassign it to me. Really easy. So, easy fix. And you're going to always want the date. With the date, and see that date is assigned to me. Doesn't help me if it's not connected to him. So we want the date that he signed it, his signature. And I always put the date about halfway back because that part is auto done. It's a timestamp based on your associated time in your profile or on their computer profile. And so it's going to have like the really long form date time. So it usually helps if you put the signature at the far left side, date signed about halfway back on any of the forms that you do. So if you had done the other version that we talked about last week where you added the people to your envelope by their roles, this would already be there. You might have to resize it. If you did it by room participants, then you're going to have to put those fields in there for them. Anything here, so again, this was a form, I didn't fill it out. I can put text boxes anywhere I want on this form. I can pre-fill them, so say I now know what the origination fee is. I can put that in there. Now, because it's a required field, when I send it to myself for signature, it's going to still bring me to this box, but I'm not going to have to change anything about it. It's just going to ask me to make sure it's okay. It has content in it. It's not going to ask me to do anything, but it's going to ask me to check it. So again, you can drag text boxes anywhere that you need them. So say you forgot the license number. This is your handwritten in. Just think about it as your handwritten. Oh, I forgot something before I send it to the client. I need something here. Once you've got everything that you need, and again, let me go down to that APHW so you can kind of see. I think that's the main tricky one. You'll see that it's pre-put in all of that information because I filled it out on details for the client name, the prospective property address, their email, their cell if you had one.
Remember, she didn't put in the client's address though? That would have filled it.
Right. So it's up to you and how much information you want to get up front, what you have up front. Say I didn't have it up front. I don't always have their mailing address at that time. So say I really want to make sure I have that from him. I'm going to change it to him, Sample McSampleson, and I'm going to pull that text in. Because it's pretty obvious what that box is supposed to be for because it's under a heading, I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm going to make it required so that he's not going to let him submit it until he has that filled out for me. That's really helpful with listing agreements with their mortgage information and getting their account number and their lender and things like that. They don't always have it on hand, but that way when they're sitting down to sign it, it's required before they can submit it. Again, you can pull like check boxes or whatever is helpful to you. So the text accessibility, you know, if I had his phone number in there, checkbox value. Yeah, but it'll ask him about it. Yeah. All right. Again, this was one of the ones that didn't have much that I could do on the form. Signature. Now you'll notice if I was to make this a really nice small signature box, and then I pulled another one down, it's going to pull down the same size. So it remembers the last time you did one. So if you make them small to start, it's a lot easier throughout the rest of your document because they're all going to be nice and small. Same thing is true with text. If I made a text box and it was this big and I wanted it to have really small, nice text, let's say you made it size 7, text, and then I grabbed another text box. It's remembering the size 7, but it's going to ask me for that size every time. Okay, go ahead and delete those back out. Where is my APHW? Okay, so this is another good example of if you hadn't filled it out, where you're going to want to put like a checkbox or a radio button. If you have, now because we did it in the details, it'll put his name automatically, but say there's something that didn't have his name, because I'm looking at Sample McSampleson, if I pull a name box down here, it'll put in their full name from the detail sheet. So it'll autofill that for him. Same thing with date signed, it's auto. He doesn't have to put in what date he signed it. Any of these, the email address, if I pull down his email, when you got back the final document, his email would be pulled from details and just automatically put in there. So some of these fields are automatically populated, and that's a really nice use of your details. So again, if you were working from the APHW PDF version of it instead of the template, things like that can save you a lot of time, so you're not retyping it and having chances for typos and errors and things like that. So you're still benefiting from the fact that you filled out the details page. I think the main ones that they've got right now are name, email, company, title, but you can also create custom fields. So that is something we're going to kind of work on some things, I think, for January to talk about how to make custom templates for yourself or teams.
Changing in January, so
right.
We have a class on how to write your own templates. We're going to wait till that happens.
So we'll cover some of the custom fields there. We just want to make sure everybody can run and write contracts at the very least in the meantime. Let's see.
That one is important. Be sure to get this signed by Bob, but make sure it's fully signed before it gets to Bob. So don't always, like you mentioned before, don't put in the path 1, 2, and 3. Have it signed. Yeah. So you see it first.
I'll show that flow. So say here, I didn't know whether they wanted to have a home inspection what I can do is I'm gonna put a radio since they have to choose between two. So again, I'm under Sample McSampleson. I'm making sure that I have him. This will make him choose one of the two before he can submit it. So that's a nice thing to do. If you're missing information that you haven't gotten as you're going through this, go, oh yeah, I need to remember to have him do this.
The radio button, I can push it or.
Either
push
or.
that, you know,
Either
one
or, and you
pop
have
up.
to choose one.
Well, that's good, because I get them all the time, when they sign it, they haven't chosen any.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's a
So
required
because we've
field,
made
so
this
they
a
have to.
required field, they have to pick one to be able to submit this document, which is great. Again, that's that famous APHW form. What you
Real
got?
quick, the one thing that I get frustrated on this form is it automatically fills in the buyer's email address. I don't want the other agent, I don't want the other seller to have that email address. So what I have to do is I have to go back in and put X's over the top of that because it's refilled. So we're gonna resolve that in the next couple of weeks here. This is, yeah, well, if you back it out, it takes it out of your detail.
That
Now
two-way
you don't
street.
have it- Now you don't have it in your other docs. So, because it's a two-way street. So if you back this out, it becomes blank on your detail
Right.
page.
So at the moment, my workaround is the PDF version of this that I pull in, and I do this all manually. I pull in the fields, I pull in, you know, who the buyer name is, things like that. And you can always have that option.
That's what she does.
That's been my
And I do it
workaround.
with Just exit out so they can't see.
Yeah.
It's just a choice.
There's multiple ways to get around just about everything in DocuSign. You could look at 10 different agents and they will do it 10 different ways, and none of them are wrong. It's just what works with your flow, what's easy for you to remember, what can you be comfortable with. So if you need ideas, if you're getting frustrated about something and you've hit it once, you've hit it twice, and you're like, and you feel yourself getting mad about it, that's the time to get clarity instead of getting frustrated. So take a minute, talk to an agent that you know is comfortable with it and go, hey, what do you do for this? Surely you run into this too, because I guarantee you out of all of us in the room, probably at least half of us have probably run into the same problem. So that way you can get multiple answers on what are your options, what is going to feel good for you.
The other thing too is in DocuSign, you do have all of these options to make adjustments. You have all these tools that if you need to get a workaround, there's usually a tool here to do it.
Yeah. All right, because I use the template version here, you'll see it has all 13 pages, which is why I pull it to the very back when I'm doing my formatting. Once you have filled out everything, you've pulled all the fields that you want your seller to be able to sign, two things you can do. Say you forgot a form, you can hit back down at the bottom here and add it back in, add another form in, and it will save everything that you've already pulled over. So if you had another document that you had forgotten, you can add it to the back of the packet. So there's still a moment until you send it, you can really adjust a lot of
It's like
things.
dropping an envelope in the mailbox. You still have it out, you can open it, you can do whatever you need to, but once you put it in that box, it's out for signatures, and once it's signed, you can't fill it.
All right, so I'm going to go back in so we can kind of see where the signatures were. And say I've gone through everything, it's now all set. I'm going to hit send. You will get a couple of different emails automatically. You will get when your envelope has been sent, you will get a notification depending on how your settings, your default settings will do this. When they've viewed it, so when they've opened it, you will see when they have signed it, when each seller has signed it, which is really helpful for kind of tracking where they're at if you need to text them and go, hey, did you get it? You can also always go to your envelopes tag. You can say right now, this one says needs my signature. So I click on that. I'm the first one, I need to sign. I can hit sign right there. It's going to prepare the agent version of it. So you can kind of see what was required. Yeah. A date on one of the fields in that? Yeah, not when it comes back to you. Right, everything has to be done before you hit that send button. Just like he was saying, it's like putting an envelope in the mail. So once you've hit send, you put it out for pickup and the mailman has it. All right, so when you receive it back, if there's any fields for you to sign, this is kind of how you're gonna see it. You're gonna see it almost the same as your client's gonna see it. You're gonna see that start button. I'm gonna make this really nice and big here. So you'll see this was a required text field. I had already filled it out. I don't have to do anything. It's just giving me a second chance to amend it. So if I had nothing in it to begin with, if I hadn't put the text in there, I could still fix that one. Anywhere you pull the text box in the DocuSign feature. This was assigned to me, whether the whether the agreement is contingent or not. So I'd have to select one before I can move on. So this is really helpful if you didn't have 100% of the information, but you wanted to prepare it as much as you could. If you were missing like one piece of information from your buyer, because you put yourself first in the line, you have the opportunity to fill in those things that you left for yourself to fill out. And I already filled that out beforehand, so I can just click that fill in. I didn't have any information here, so I would have to put something in there to be able to move forward. When you're done, you just hit that finish, and I'll show you kind of what the in between will be. And I just got a notification that I finished signing it. That envelope now changes to waiting for others. So if you click on it.
Refresh your screen though, too. Sometimes it won't change until you refresh your screen.
Yeah. So you can see on this one that I have gotten it. I have signed it as of 12:15 at 3 p.m. and that Sample McSampleson still needs to sign. So if I was to go in as Sample McSampleson, I have him set in my email. Sample McSampleson has gotten an email that asked him to review documents. I'm going to just hit those signs so you can see what it creates while that's going on. So if you're in this, say your buyer said, I didn't get it, or you're just not sure if they've gotten it and you want to kind of nudge them, you can hit resend and it'll send them an updated like, hey, please sign this. You can also X out here and get back to your documents. Nothing here has changed yet. Until everybody has signed it, this is exactly how it's going to look. If you change a form, it's not going to change it in your envelope. Remember, you've sent it off via the mailman. So this is just kind of your general room at the moment. This is going to change once all the signatures are in. You would, you sent it to the wrong email address, like the wrong recipient. Yeah, then you can go into details, or I believe you can go in on the envelope. If you've made certain types of errors, you can click on that envelope and you can click on correct. And it'll give you some options. So you can't change which documents are in there because somebody's already signed it. Just like you can't change a contract once somebody's already signed it if the other party hasn't signed it. You can't scratch it out and change the offer price or whatever. So you'll see that there's locks on. You can't take away any documents. You can't change any forms there. But if you needed to add somebody else, or as you can see, I can still change the email address associated with it. So if I had a typo in that email address and you catch that, that's a good place to go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just quickly sign as the other person on my personal account. And I know that's super small. It's just purely so that you can see what the final thing looks like. Apparently it's not liking my personal email today. Yeah. The template has them. It has a radio button for every spot, whether there's content there or not. So if you've noticed, I think it's on page 2, like the roofing section has some blank things where there's no actual thing that you're checking yes, no, or not sure. You still have to check one of those. So that's kind of a pain with the template at the moment, that those are still required fields, even where they're blank. But there's sets of radio buttons that are already lined up and assigned. So as long as they do yes, no, not sure, it is still really hard. I think anytime you try and do a seller's disclosure electronically, it can be a pain. You're going to want to make sure to assign those fields to the right person. So if there's one seller that you think is more comfortable with being able to answer whether it's a gas or electric furnace or things like that, make sure you assign that field to them. There is also an option in there, I'd have to look to see exactly where it's at, that lets you say either or. So either party could fill this out. So there's a couple of different ways you can play with it there. Yes, they all should be there. You're just going to want to adjust whether it's, yeah, automatic or not. And you can always also, if they've filled it out by hand, scan it in, add it as a PDF. There we go. All right, so my buyer has now finished it. I'm going to get a notification in an email that they have signed it. Sometimes if you're sitting on this page, you're not going to be able to see that they've signed it right away. So you just refresh your screen like you were saying. All right. Once it's signed, it'll go green. You'll be able to see what time he signed it. It's taking a second for it to reload. There are all those lovely notifications that they've looked at it and signed it. If you have multiple buyers and sellers, you will get quite a few little emails, but it is kind of nice to track it and know who's on the game and who might need a little nudge.
If you're getting multiple offers on the listing or something, be sure to label each one of your offers with the person's last name or something so you know what's coming in and you can organize it.
Right.
When it comes in. That's the purpose of the last week where I created separate envelopes, offer Smith, offer Jones, offer whatever. When that comes back in, it's going to come with that label on it. I can immediately grab it.
And you know what it is and who it is. Yeah, folders are your friend.
If everything ends up in your room docs folder, I don't know.
All right. So it may take a couple of refreshes for the system to catch all of those documents once they've been signed and re-pull them back out. When you get the signatures, you're going to get a couple of things. You're going to see alphabetical order. So this is your room docs. This is your messy room docs. You're going to see the certification. And if we open that up, you can actually see who signed it, when. It shows a sample of their signature and all of that. It's just kind of a nice, it's a nice little receipt. Yeah. So we talked about, we have kind of different styles. I am a big fan of that archive button. So when a certification comes in, I archive it right away because otherwise it will get very, very messy by the end of the transaction when you have 15 of those things. And receipts are great, but you usually want to file them away, right? You don't necessarily want to have them sitting out on your desk. So if you have archived anything, you can always go up to this top and switch from active documents to archived documents. You can pull any of them back into your room at any time. That's a nice thing versus a delete feature that you can always get to your archive, but you don't have to be seeing everything all the time. So going back to my active documents. So this is, again, another spot where I like a little bit tidier and cleaner of a room. So for me, the first thing I do is I look for all of these green versions, which are going to be the signed version. You'll see that every document now has dash signed on it. That'll tell you that whatever party was in that original envelope has now signed it. If I was to take this green document and click create envelope again, so that's what I would do for managing broker docs. I would create an envelope just for Bob. I like to label that one managing broker docs, so I know exactly looking back at my envelope, what envelope that was doing. I'll add him by email address rather than as a room participant, so we can look at that.
Every time you send it out, your signature is appended to sign, they sign, they sign,
Right.
they sign. So if you rename it, it starts back to beginning. You have broker doc sign. So it helps just to.
Yeah, so just to give a visual, that add by email address, it's in that same spot we had done the room participants before, but you can send it just to somebody with a name and an email. Assign fields to them the same way we did before. I won't go through all of that because we did that on the last training. I'll leave that as a draft envelope. But what I like to do is I take all of my greens, all of my signed forms, select just those. Every now and then I'll click on them and have to exit back out, but it remembers which ones you had selected at least. And I will move those via this little button into the folder I already created in my current room, buyer signed offer. So those are my three folders, the room docs, the buyer signed offer, and the executory docs that are signed by all. That way I can kind of track their progress through. So for me, and this is another spot where we're different, so he likes to leave the forms in the room docs so that he always has that form if you need to get another version of it signed or anything like that. He likes to have that template readily available. Yeah. For me, I like my room docs to be like my to-do list. If something is sitting in there, I have to do something with it or it's waiting on something. So if I hadn't gotten my signatures back yet, I would absolutely leave those in the room docs. For me, I like to archive them. I can always get back to them later and bring them back into active if I need to, if the offer falls out, things like that. But for me, I like to not have them in my brain. Yeah. So I like a really clean room with, these are just my final docs that I'm seeing active. Other than that, things are archived. Once the seller has signed these, I will actually rename them again. So if I, let's do it this way. Say I selected the things that just need to go to the other side. So the COVID addendum, we were asking for a warranty, purchase agreement, alternative dispute, closing. You can hit up here as combine. So I like to send everything to my listing agents when it's an offer in a single packet. I don't like to send 5 different documents via PDFs. Yeah, I'll show that in just a second. So offer 1234 Main Street, and you can change around what order, just like we did when we were signing. So I like to put my purchase agreement first. I might pull my pre-approval up there and save. That doesn't change the separate docs there, but it does give you an additional packet now, PDF packet down in your room docs. So you can go ahead and click on that button and hit download, and it'll download it as a PDF. I like to send it via email. He likes to send them via DocuSign to your listing agent. Again, the only main difference is you get a certificate back that they viewed it if you do it via this, but you'll also get an offer 1234 Main Street certificate and a version that says dash signed. When they didn't really sign it, they just viewed it. You're sending it to the listing agent. So it's kind of up to you what flow you want to do. I like to send it via email, send a text in an email saying, please confirm that you've received this.
I go to the DocuSign tab and I send it to them with review only. As soon as they open that up, it gives me a green on it saying that they saw it. So 2 different ways.
Yeah, there's kind of perks to either way that you do it. But again, you can always combine. And the other nice thing is the opposing side of that. If you get an offer in as the listing agent, you can right click on it and split it. We talked about that a little bit last week, where you can divide out the different pages so that you can have your compliance and not have everything in one packet. You can name them however you want. So if this was a signed offer, I would make my first document purchase agreement dash signed by all. That is always how I name my documents that are ready for compliance. They have all the signatures that they need. So give yourself some phrases in your naming of your documents that will help you know where they're at. That's one of the nice features about being able to rename anything as you go. Make it easier on yourself to do compliance at the end. Yep. Yep. And you can put a range here. So I could say page 1 to 8. If you can't see what they are, which happens a lot, you can kind of mouse over it and it'll show it to you bigger so you can figure out what page that is. And you can split it as many times as you want. So you can take any PDF and split it out into mini PDFs if you need to too. You can also, if something was in your room docs and you don't want to do the move, you can always just drag them to the next folder too. A little less precise, but it is pretty helpful there. And I think the only thing left to do once you have those signed would be adding in your files back here. Now, one thing to notice, if you are connecting something via DocuSign and you are using folders, because remember folders are your friends, You can, when you click that radio button for DocuSign, you can select what folder you're looking at. So if I'm doing with compliance, I'm always going to be in this executory docs because it has to have all the signatures before I put it up for compliance. So that's one of the helpful ways to have that buyer signed only or seller signed only. If it's listing docs, you know which folder you're going from and you're going to be able to find it. The root folder, when you have that set, will pull up everything. So you'll see there's a little tiny buyer signed offer, but you're going to have to scroll through a lot of docs, anything that's in your room, if you don't select a folder here. All right, I think that covers most everything. You want to open it up for, yeah. I found that most of them have a really easy time. The program is really set up really nicely. It flashes color boxes at them. It doesn't give them a whole lot of options all at once. I like to tell them it'll come from DocuSign, just because that's going to be the one thing to check your spam filters, and this is what you're looking for. But it literally will say start up at the top, and the rest of the document is grayed out until they hit that, and it'll bring them to the first spot that they have to sign. It'll tell them what they have to do. It'll either say sign, they click that, it'll bring up a signature box. So it really gives it to them one step at a time, which is really nice.
And you can scroll through it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you could absolutely create that.
Also goes over everything, and I do too, in a listing presentation. She brings all the docs and says, this is what you're going to see. You can see this,
Right.
this, and this. And then it comes to DocuSign, and everybody goes, oh yeah, that's really good.
I actually have, for some buyers, and I don't do this with everybody, it kind of depends on their home buying experience, but I have printed out copies of the buyer contracts and things like that and just have a blank highlighted version with me so that I can just go over it with them in person real quick if we're at a house or anything like that. Sometimes that's helpful for them, sometimes it's not. It's just totally up to you and what you're comfortable with and what level of hand-holding a client needs. We know that they're all different, right?
There are times where I'll call in and fill stuff out, have them with the buyer, so that when they're signing, I'm actually there to walk through it as well.
Yeah, our team is pretty flexible, and that's the other benefit to having that Google Chrome people up here. Like I said, if you're a TC or you work in a team, you can actually have different settings per person, all under one window. So if I want to go in as Jay, say I'm the TC, I have a couple of bookmarks saved up here that are his matrix login, his command login, his DocuSign, his .loop, so that I can get to those really quickly if I'm working on his behalf. I'm not having to remember which login is that, which username is that. It's saved just per that profile. So they have some really cool, if you need help setting that up, let me know. I'm happy to do that for you. It's about 5 minutes to do. But that is a really nice feature of Google Chrome if you're managing things for a team. So,
Remember passwords, you have to remember what
right, that allows me.
She can go right to anything as if she were me.
Right. That allows me to be able to like write, right. But that allows me to like write an offer for Cody as Cody and not send it, but I can do all the prep work while he's driving back from the showing so that by the time he gets back to his office, it's already sitting ready for him to hit send. So if you're a TC and you're preparing things.
On site where they want to make an offer right then and there, she's already writing the contract to get it to him for signature right away. And in this market, that's a real big advantage because you've got somebody that
Right.
already has all this already.
I've had cases where we're at that property, and just showing them the offer written something in half an hour. Great.
When you get into a flow, this should be taking you about 45 minutes. It'll probably take you an hour, hour 15 the first time you do it, first time or two, but it becomes really, really second nature after a while. And again, if you have, TCs or anything like that, people who are helping you, again, they can fill out the form version from within the room and send it to you with text boxes of required fields for you to fill in the things that are specific to you. you know, for that deal so that you can answer those questions on the signature page. So that's kind of the nice thing about the two-step process. I know it feels a little bit strange to do the form side first and then the signature side second, but it does give you kind of a second chance or a chance to get most things done and come back and revisit what you need to. Any other questions, things you've struggled with, things you're concerned about? I think Kristen had a duck out. I will pull up two real quick. Yeah, let's see if I can make them big enough. Yeah, and I will put these up on our Facebook group too. Like I said, I'm a visual person, so I was thinking like, you know, we've got the 10 bold laws, right? So your 4 amazing tips and tricks for DocuSign, get with the flow. You've got to do things in the right order to make it easy for yourself. So number 1 is your contact in command. Number 2 is your opportunity. 3, start your transaction. So those things are red. Those are in the command domain. Then we're going to switch over to DocuSign. Number 4, details. And we're going to add and fill your docs. And last step is the envelope. And I kind of tried to do those as the red light, green light too. Red light, get these in first. Yellow light, green light is when you're ready to go, send it to your client. So that'll help you if you're getting stuck on something and you're like, I can't find this, I can't do this. Make sure you've done all the steps in the right order. If you're missing a form, if you can't find something, ask yourself, where IAR are you? It's almost always in the IAR forms library group, almost always. And you have that nifty little search feature. Yeah, it's been helpful to me to know where to look if it's not in that automated packet. Most things are in the packet, but you have weird situations every day. If you need a mutual release, you need a new builder form, most of the time it'll be in that IAR folder.
To that packet came from IAR.
Right, most of it, yeah.
Well, our side, yeah. So.
Yeah. So start there, and then from there, go to Syra, from there, go to KW. But usually most things are in that IAR library group. Folders are your friends. Figure out a flow that works for you that's going to help you organize. Just like at your desk, you might have folders for different things. In DocuSign, set up your folders so that they'll help you with your compliance and tracking. And then details and docs are a two-way street. So if you change it in one, it's going to change it in the other. I also have, I'll pop this up to you. I'm sorry, the font is tiny on this screen. A daily dose of DocuSign. So if you want to get started on DocuSign in 5 days, I've got a little task for you that'll take you 10, 15 minutes each day. I will put it up on the Facebook group. I'll print out a copy if you want a copy. Right. So this would be making a sample offer or a sample listing, your choice. But don't do it all in one day. If you sit down and you try and do a thing start to finish all in one day by yourself, you will probably get a little bit overwhelmed and confused. So give yourself 10, 15 minutes every day, do one task and get to know that task really well so that the next day you can do that task plus the next task. Right, yeah. So like in mine today, my contact was Sample McSampleson. It doesn't hurt anything to have an extra contact in there. I might get an extra email to my personal email if I'm emailing my database or something through command, but it really doesn't hurt anything. So set up a sample as yourself, try it out, see what your client's gonna get. So that would be another good thing. Put yourself as a personal email.
With an alternate email that you guys
Yeah.
can access to.
And that way you know what they're seeing when they get it, because that's always a little bit weird. But I'll post both of those to the Facebook group. Print them out for anybody who wants them, email them, whatever works best for you. If you come across something that you're struggling with, feel free to email me, text me, call me. I love helping people get running and flowing, and I know it can be frustrating when you're trying to write up an offer and you can't find something or you can't do something. So I want to make sure that you guys can run your business efficiently and effectively, and DocuSign is really an awesome tool for doing that. It's a tricky little learning curve if you're switching gears, but hopefully,
You have to get the
hopefully
Dot brain
gone.
muted, and you have to think about it. If you try to do both, you'll get frustrated because they do the same thing.
And again, we'll try, January, February, beginning of the year, to talk through how to build templates for your teams, how to deal with things, in different ways that'll save you time. But we just want to make sure everybody can do the basics to start. Any other questions, concerns, struggles?
Anything, if you're on a team and you might be having something Is there something that the team is wanting that we can kind of put into the next training? Or a single agent, what do you see that you're not seeing? You know? Yes.
We're gonna look at adjusting some of the ones that need to be adjusted, yeah.
Yeah.
To the text,
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That's on a programming
I'm gonna go
side
ahead
in DocuSign. So that's gonna be having them do it. Any other
All right.
questions?
I think that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing.
Did you feel like you got any value out of it? Good, good.